Human origins. It's a topic that so often feels like this epic battleground. On one side, you have the Islamic account of creation, and on the other, the scientific theory of evolution. But what if they aren't actually at war? What if there's a different way to look at it? Today, we're going to explore a perspective that actually tries to find harmony between the two.
An impossible alliance? Yeah, for a lot of people, that's exactly what it seems like. The whole debate usually gets stuck between these two extremes, right? You've got a literal, instantaneous creation on one side and a purely random, totally purposeless evolution on the other. It really feels like you have to pick a team. But what if there's a compelling third way?
So let's start right there by unpacking this great divide. It's a powerful story we've all heard a million times. Faith and science are in separate corners, duking it out, offering completely irreconcilable stories about where we all came from.
And those two classic positions are just so stark. On the one hand, you have this idea of a static, instantaneous creation, like boom, a single, miraculous event. And on the other, a purely material process, just driven by random chance with no goal, no purpose at all. But the perspective we're digging into today reframes this whole debate. It views creation not as a single moment in time, but as a continuous, unfolding process.
And that brings us to a really foundational idea: creation as a process. So let's dive in and re-examine some key concepts from the Quran that actually describe creation as something dynamic and developing over time, not just a one-and-done event.
Okay, so a word you absolutely need to know here is etivar. It's a Quranic term, and it translates to things like stages, phases, or gradual states. This is a huge concept because it immediately shifts the frame from a single event to a deliberate phased development.
And look, this isn't some kind of modern reinterpretation people came up with recently. The scripture itself, right there in Surah Nuh, says it directly. And he has created you in stages, etvar. So the idea of a phased, gradual creation is embedded right there in the text.
And if you want a really tangible example of this, the Quran points to human embryology. It actually describes our development in these distinct phases, from a nutfeh, which is a drop of fluid, to an alaqa, a clinging, leech-like form, then a mudgha, a kind of lump of tissue, and finally into a new inspirited being. It's a clear, observable process, all laid out in stages.
So, you might be asking, if creation happens in stages, what governs those stages? Well, that brings us to another key concept, sunnatullah, which you can think of as the divine laws of nature. From this point of view, the physical laws we observe, biology, chemistry, physics, they aren't separate from God. They are the consistent system, the very pattern through which His will operates. They're the how of His creation.
All right, so now that we have that foundation, let's build on it. This is where we start to see how these theological ideas about a process-driven creation find some really fascinating parallels in modern scientific findings. Okay, get this. Here's a really striking parallel. The Quran talks about all of humanity originating from a tek nefes, or a single soul. Meanwhile, science, through genetics, has pinpointed a mitochondrial Eve and a Y chromosomal atom. These are the most recent common ancestors for every single living human through our maternal and paternal lines. Now, one is a theological concept and the other is genetic for sure, but they both point to a single origin for our entire human family. So then what about all our differences, our different languages, skin colors, adaptations? From this perspective, that genetic diversity isn't proof of randomness at all. Instead, all those variations are seen as signs of divine wisdom, a purposeful, measured plan to equip humanity to thrive in all these different environments all over the globe. Okay, so all of this has been building up to the main event, the central synthesis of this whole explainer, this idea of a divinely guided evolution, where purpose and process finally come together. Now, this synthesis is often called theistic evolution. The source material we're looking at uses the Turkish term tedrici takamul, which you could translate as gradual perfection. And the core idea is this: the observable process of evolution isn't some aimless, random accident. It's the very method, the actual tool that God uses to carry out His creative plan. And this little table here really highlights the core differences. You see, materialist evolution says the cause is basically random chance, and the purpose is, well, there is no purpose. It's aimless. Theistic evolution, on the other hand, sees the cause as divine will, acting through those natural laws we talked about, with a purpose, a directed goal.
And this redefines humanity, not just as a really smart animal, but as a being with both a physical body and a soul.
And this right here is the absolute crucial distinction. Let's be super clear. This framework doesn't reject the process of evolution that science describes so well. What it rejects is the purely philosophical assumption that the process has to be aimless and random. The fundamental difference isn't about the what or the how, it's about the belief in a who and a why.
So where does that leave us? How can we actually hold these two big ideas together in our minds? Well, this synthesis suggests that faith and science can coexist, not as rivals, but as two different lenses for looking at the very same, very complex reality.
And really, here's the key takeaway of the whole thing. Science is absolutely brilliant at answering the how questions, you know? It uncovers the physical mechanisms, the genetic pathways, the geological timelines. Faith, on the other hand, is concerned with the why. What's the purpose of it all? What's our meaning in this universe? They're not even competing for the same answers, because they're asking fundamentally different questions.
And what's really interesting is that from this point of view, the Quran itself is seen as encouraging this kind of scientific inquiry. This verse right here from Surah Al-Ankabut is often interpreted as a direct command to go out, to explore, to travel, to investigate, to use our own powers of observation to understand the mechanics of how creation actually began. It's basically a call to do science. And all of that brings us right here, to our final thought. If science is the investigation of how, and faith is the exploration of why, do their answers really have to be in conflict? Or is it possible that together they give us a much richer, a more complete picture of our origins and our place in the universe? That's a question definitely worth reflecting on.